Hello Year 11. Today I'm going to give you a few poetry revision tips for the poem Charge of the Light Brigade by Lord Alfred Tennyson. As you know, Tennyson was one of the greatest poets of the Victorian era and was actually given the title Poet Laureate, which is a very prestigious title. The poem is set in 1854 during the Crimean War. It describes a terrible battle, the Battle of Balaclava, between the British cavalry and the Russian forces. During this battle, a horrible mistake was made by the commanding officer, Lord Cardigan. The Light Brigade were ordered to advance into a valley surrounded by their enemy. This led to many deaths. Tennyson wrote this poem after reading about the tragedy in a newspaper. It is quite significant to note here that Tennyson chooses to focus on the bravery and heroism of the soldiers rather than the blunder, which was an actual quotation from the poem, of Lord Cardigan. It is significant to note here that Tennyson decides to focus on the bravery and heroism of the soldiers rather than the blunder, which is an actual quotation from the poem, the mistake made by Lord Cardigan, their commanding officer. Now, the reason for this may be Tennyson wouldn't actually be allowed to speak out against the war. If anyone, in fact, spoke out against the war, this would have been seen or considered to be an act of treason. On to other important quotations. There are many images repeated throughout the poem. As the poem is a ballad, repetition is actually kind of important. For example, all in the valley of death. This is an extended metaphor, and it can actually be seen in different variations throughout the poem, such as jaws of death, mouth of hell. The valley of death refers to the location of the battle and where it actually took place. It gives the impression that the soldiers were marching towards their death, marching towards their doom. They were fated to die. It also has biblical connotations. Valley of death is actually part of a funeral sermon. We could infer that here Tennyson wants to honour the soldiers in their death and feels that they should be given more respect. Finally, Rode the 600. Now, during the first three stanzas, this serves as part of the refrain, which is a structural technique known to ballads. Rode the 600 refers to the actual Light Brigade. The fact that it is repeated a few times throughout the poem tells us that the soldiers were relentless in battle, and even though they had many disadvantages against them, they still tried and still fought with honour. Now, Rode the 600 can be found towards the end of each stanza. It does alter depending on what the stanza is about. As you know, the poem is written in a chronological order. So, the 600, or Rode the 600, refers to all 600 men which fought against the Russian army. Towards the end of the poem, we have statements such as not the 600, left of the 600. This indicates that obviously many lives were lost in battle. And finally, the noble 600, which is a really important quotation. Noble has many meanings. In its adjective form, it can refer to a person's rank or title and is often linked with the aristocracy. Further connotations imply that noble can actually refer to a person's qualities. Here, we can assume that Tennyson is referring to the bravery exhibited by all soldiers.